Okay, there we go. Now I'm loud. Thank you all for being here on a Tuesday afternoon. I know you all are very busy, and I want to respect your time, so we'll go ahead and get started. So you're here for a session on aligning the 10 essential skills with your gen ed courses and assessments. This professional development series on the essential skills comes out of a whole lot of work that the grad profile team has done. Rusty Carpenter, who had to be in 3 other places, and this wasn't one of them, but has done an enormous amount of work on this. Star Wenzel, who's really been instrumental in organizing the grad profile team. Krista Kimmel, who is our grad profile lead, skill lead of leads. Trina Napier, who's contributed substantially from the library. Matt Winslow, who has really helped envision a lot of parts of this, particularly the pathways. And there will be a pathway design workshop coming up after the break. And Karina Powell is not here yet. Oh, she just walked in. Perfect timing. Excellent. Is an assistant professor in sociology with me, and is also on the grad profile team. And I'm Allison Buck. I know most of you, but I am vice chairing the implementation operations committee for Essential Ed, and have been involved with this in various ways. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have some goals for the session. One of the things that we want to do is have clear, consistent language as we implement the essential skills. We don't want to have 5 different definitions of critical thinking across 5 different programs. And we think the best way to do that is bottom up, drawing on feedback from faculty who actually teach gen ed courses. So that's one thing that we'll do today. Talk about how do we get there? How do we get to clear, consistent language? We're going to focus on skill 10, and we're going to see how skill 10 can map into your existing assessments that you're already using to assess student learning outcomes or SAC-COC competencies, both probably in many cases. We're going to start you on the path to redesigning existing assessments. And the key here, again, I bet you all teach students to use information for decision-making. Does anybody raise your hand if you teach students to use information for decision-making in your course? Yeah, we all do it. We all do it. This is about making it transparent and explicit. We're going to take a little bit of a look at indicators, rubrics, and think a little bit about how to create clear rubrics, and gain some confidence towards assessment and STAR reporting requirements. Anybody nervous about that? The assessment piece of this with the essential ed? Okay. Gain some confidence with that. So we'll start with just some background on essential ed and assessment. Then we'll get into reinforcing the skills at the assignment level, some fundamentals, an example, working a little bit on revision, and then looking at application next steps. So who here feels completely confident with what's changing and what's not in the fall? Who would like just like a little bit of review of what's changing, what's not changing? Okay, let's do that really fast. Okay. So I want to start with the good news. What's not changing? Here are the things that are staying the same. Here's the continuity, right? The competencies for each element are staying the same. No changes there, everything's the same. The focus and the subject matter represented in the elements. We know that the element numbers are changing a little bit, but these elements are still basically the same. what you do in the classroom. Again, you already teach these students how to use information for decision-making. You teach them how to communicate effectively. You teach them how to think critically. We know that you do that. We're not trying to change that. The bulk of your existing assessments probably don't need to change. If you want to change them, you can, but we're looking at tweaks. We're looking at making what's implicit explicit. We're not looking at ground up new assignments. As of fall 26, we will have new emphasis on skill 10, which is the use information for decision making, information literacy skill, and then your element specific skill. Those do need to be assessed as of the fall. And we need, again, transparent language. It's about transparency. It's less about adding and it's more about making the implicit explicit. And then rubrics to account for skills and competencies. Slight changes to the STAR reporting forms. There are some other changes like the addition of flex and the introduction of pathway courses. Shout out to Dr. Winslow. Very cool. But this is really what's relevant to us today in terms of what's changing. So in terms of assessment, we do have to do 2 assignments per element. The way that this works, we've got 2 skills and 2 competencies. The essential skills coming to us from CPE, the competencies coming to us from SAC-COC. And you can stack a skill on top of a competency. And I think that's going to work pretty well for a lot of us. It won't be that hard to do. And then the STAR report is going to add the skill competencies alongside the existing SAC-COC competencies. So this will be a little bit more complicated if you're in more than one element. But this is kind of the basic idea. You can assess a skill and a competency at the same time. You could do these all separately as well, but that's not the recommendation. We want this to be a light lift. We want this to be small changes, not gigantic ones. Here's what the STAR report will look like. So everybody brought an assessment today, an assignment with them? Awesome, awesome, okay, love it. We're going to take that assignment and we're going to try and make it into something that could speak to the first competency and the first skills competency. And some of the work that you're doing will also talk about why the instrument is appropriate for assessing the competency. Okay, so this should look familiar. Has everybody seen the essential skills? Probably many times, yeah. We've all seen them before. We've all looked at them a lot. I think I have them memorized. I think I see them in my sleep a little bit. Yeah, but why are they essential? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about why they're essential for EKU, for students, and for gen ed. Like, why are we doing this? So CPE wants us to. That's a pretty good reason. No, they don't just want us to, they said you have to do it. So that's a pretty good reason, right? We do need to do it for them. But I don't think that like what CPE wants is what gets us out of bed in the morning when we're tired and it's snowing after it's been 60 degrees. Well, some of us may just have unprecedented dedication to CPE. But I think for a lot of us, it's our students, right? It's our students that really motivate us. And our students don't have the same cultural capital as students from UK. Our students are heavily first gen, low income. They don't have the same socialization. They don't have the same background that is giving them ins in the job market, that is making them confident that they are the people who should be leading in their communities. And we want them to have that. And you can teach them skills until the cows come home, but if you don't tell them that you're teaching them, they probably can't tell you that they've learned them. They can't tell you that they have leadership skills unless you say, you did this. This was a leadership experience. Then they can go into a job interview, or they can pull on that when they're thinking, somebody really should fix this problem in my community. But it couldn't be me. I don't have any leadership skills. We want them to be confident. We want them to have that confidence. And why gen ed? Our mission for gen ed here is to focus on intellectual and academic pursuits. And to, let me see if I can find the exact quote here. I don't usually like to read, but this one I want to. Yeah. Promote learning that is central to the intellectual pursuits associated with our educational programs and enable students to make informed choices about matters of public and personal significance in a democratic society and global community. So we want them to succeed in all the areas of life, in their personal lives, in their careers, in their communities. And gen ed is the place where we give them those skills. It already is. It's already where we do that. Okay. So let's talk about what we need to do to bring us to a point where we can talk about the 10 essential skills. We can get those consistently throughout our gen ed curriculum. And we can be sure that we're talking about them in a consistent way and measuring them in a consistent way. So we have a handout here. We want to use consistent language. How do we do that? So again, skill 10 is use information for decision making. How can we do that in a consistent way? How can we get consistent language? And how can we also ensure that the skill language is student friendly? If you want to pull up that handout, and you may have an email as well that has a link. It went through.
Yeah.
Okay, did. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so if you'd rather just click a link on your computer, you can do that as well. So I'd like you to take 2 or 3 minutes and talk about that with your table. How can we avoid, how do we have consistent language? You just make the problem. I missed it, so I'm trying to find them. The first question is, yeah, there's like skill 10 at the top, but if you go down to step 1 and question 1, should get you there.
You could ask 2 simple one of the lower-base rate, higher for minor rate, higher voice rate. And it'll say this value paper for this that's your also have this fine because of the analysis. So I just did what I want to is I actually in one sorry, that's yes. The interpretation now is services assessment is like that. The methods, finding the
Many tables have at least one good idea. You're getting there. Okay. Okay.
Now, when you're asking this question, I totally understand your question. Using consistent language in our assessments for students to read, well, because the first thing that I can think of is that if it's consistent, and even if it's repetitive, it takes everybody to the skull science and hearing the same thing, so they do the thing, right? So. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And if we say it differently,
Yeah.
then our students going to retain it when they get to that point and then
They're understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I think that's a great point. So if we do need it to be consistent, partly because students won't retain it if we don't do it consistently. I know you could probably spend the whole time on this, but I do want to move us forward. So even if you're just at the beginning of this, even if you haven't had time to think deeply about this, what are a couple of ideas or points, just things to think about that occur to you when you see these questions? Or that came up when you were talking about these questions at your tables?
I mean, so one thing that comes to mind for me is thinking about how consistency doesn't necessarily need to mean identical, right? I mean, I think we need some consistent shared language that we're sharing, but then we also need to be talking with our students about how does this specifically apply within that context, right? The context of the class or of the discipline, so that they're also, and this is helpful for students, right? Because they do need to think about how a large umbrella category then can be made specific to a context, because that's what they're going to have to do professionally as well. Is being able to do that. We don't want them to just come away with a rote memorization of things. We want them to come away with flexibility so that on the job or in an interview, they could say, well, here's how this would apply in this sort of a situation. So we kind of want to have a balance, right, that has consistency, that is branching off of those consistent terms and then connecting it to specifics in a way that we're avoiding just simple rote motions or memorization.
I think that's a great point. Because also probably the way that Dom uses information or teaches students to use information for decision making in his courses is different from the way that I do it in a sociology class. So yes, it needs to be consistent, but it doesn't need to be identical. In fact, that's kind of a drawback. So reiterating the language, but also having some flexibility in the way that it's deployed, having some room. Yeah. Anything else that came up for you all?
I'm hung up in trying to figure out why we need consistent language or how we can create consistent language. I'm hung up on the meaning of decision making and how that would apply in different course contexts. So I'm having a hard time thinking about using consistent language when I'm not sure of what the term means myself. I don't think we need it in different classes. I'm not sure we're going to be consistent in different classes about decision making.
Right. So I think you're right. I think decision making can look like a lot of different things. My recommendation, and we'll get into this in a little bit, would be to think more broadly than narrowly. We keep the language, but maybe it allows us that flexibility. We stay with decision making, and this is just where I'm thinking right now. But I think you might make very different decisions using information in a history class or a political science class than you would in a STEM course. So we do need something that's broad enough to encompass that.
Well, what information is too, right? Also, I think is going to vary depending on the course and the discipline, right? What's credible information in a given context?
Yeah. I think these are great points. I want you to all please keep thinking about that.
The 5 indicators. How are those different? Those are maybe a way that we define it or not?
So the indicators on the worksheets, that comes from CPE. That comes from CPE. The way that I understand that document is these are different ways that could look. That these are different ways that a milestone, sophomore or junior, you've been introduced to it once, but now it's being reinforced kind of level of using information for decision-making could look. And I think that acknowledges, again, that there's flexibility, there's difference in the way that this skill could be deployed in different classes. Okay. Yeah, I'd like you to keep thinking about this, maybe keep discussing this with other colleagues in your program or elsewhere. I would love for you to take this worksheet and think about it and work with it and upload it later. But I think these are really good points to think about. Things that we need to think about, like how do we keep the language broad enough that we can encompass a lot of different courses without making it inconsistent and while still reinforcing it so that students hear it enough times that they know what they're learning. They know what they're doing. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about what it looks like to incorporate the skills at the assignment level. So one of the things that we're doing here is shifting from assessing content to seeing if they can actually use the skill. Are they using the skill? So an example might be if I have a course where I'm asking them to know what the sociological imagination is, which is, locating the individual within a larger social context, moving away from just seeing if they can explain it correctly, to doing something like, I'm going to give you 2 articles. I'm going to give you a blog post and I'm going to give you an essay. Are these people using the sociological imagination? They have the information about what the sociological imagination is. Now, can they use that information to determine how well, to what extent the sociological imagination is being used? Again, a lot of this may be like, maybe you're already doing this in your assessments. I anticipate that a lot of folks will look at their assessment and they'll say, yeah, I'm already asking people. I'm asking my students to use information for decision-making. We want that to be explicit. We want it to say, you're going to learn skill 10. Here's what skill 10 is. We want them to know that they're using information for decision-making. I'm not going to get too deeply into TILT. How many of you have heard of TILT before? Some of you are experts. Some of you are giving workshops on it next week. Karina and John. But the first word in that is transparency in teaching and learning. So using the TILT approach gets us to a place where we're telling them exactly what we want to assess. We're telling them what we want them to learn. We're telling them what knowledge we want them to walk away with, what application it has, and then how we're going to assess them on it. So it's a really good fit with what we're trying to do here. So I would like you all to take a look at this before and after. Just take a minute or two and review this example. This is somebody who redesigned an assignment, a math assignment, Math 105 assignment. And this is skill 8. But they took their original assignment and they tilted the assignment and they also incorporated the skill into the assignment. If you got the email from me, it has a link to the folder with all the resources. Okay.
Where are these things coming from? Are they coming from the website, the website, or are they coming from?
These are in a Google Docs folder.
Can I find this on resources? I don't do Google Docs. I don't have any.
If we can send an email, let's see. Yeah. Yeah.
My question would be, I've given the I've given the STARS assessments last fall for both assessments.
And I did them in class. I had longer classes at that time. This time I have shorter classes. Are we allowed to use these assessments as homework assignments where they can take them home and do them? Or do they have to be done in class?
Great question. These can look a lot of different ways. The assessments they could be a big project, they could be a homework assignment, they could be a quiz, they could be an in-class skit. They can look a lot of different ways. They can be very, very low stakes, or they could be a higher stakes assignment. Whatever works for you, whatever is, yeah. Yeah. So this is obviously a little bit of a more complex assignment.
I've added it to that Q&A.
Thank you. Okay.
So if you go to EKU's webpage or our grad profile page, so EKU grad profile, at the bottom of it, there is going to be under resources, a link that has a Q&A document, and I've just linked it there. You'll see it under the backward design.
Yeah.
It's not pretty like the rest of it yet, but it will be.
So those of you who have been able to find this a little bit more easily, is there anything that you notice right off the bat about the before and after here?
Transparency.
For the activity, the assignment has a clear purpose, especially if you look, the amended one has, the student is able to see what is the purpose, what knowledge am I learning, how is this being evaluated? And it's interesting that it's 17 pages and the other is 3 pages, but so it got a lot longer. But I mean, the original prompt is working groups of 2 or 3 to answer each of the following questions. I like this part. Show all work and clearly indicate your final answer. Answers without supporting work or work that is sloppy or illegible will not receive credit. That is beyond vague.
Yeah.
For the student. So a lot of our best students will have no struggle with that, but the majority of our students will say that was not a clear directive or prompt. And then I don't even know, the student would also say, we're just joking about Chuck really hates math, but I really hate math. That if you're taking this course and you're not inclined, your brain is not inclined towards math, you look at that and you say, it's simple, but yet I'm lost. And that's interesting. But the other version is a lot more language to it, but more clarity as you read it. For me, again, and I'm a moron.
Yes. Would other folks agree with that? There's more clarity to the instructions on the redesigned assignment. Would you all agree with that? I think, yeah. I think we went into a fair amount of detail about that. I think that's exactly right. I think there is more clarity, even though it's longer, it's also clearer. Simplicity is not always our students' friend. Maybe they need a little bit more instruction. And then I know from over here, we also heard more clarity. Yeah. Yeah, transparency.
Like the instructions have a purpose, objectives, which the other one didn't have. So
yeah. And they know why they're doing it, the purpose, right? We're telling them why they're doing it.
So I was gonna mention that because I've been finding myself in my class, just telling my students, this is why we're doing this, like seriously, because sometimes we do very mechanical activities of like verb conjugation, they're like, oh my God. But I'm like, listen, we're doing this because you're gonna do an oral assessment next week, so you're gonna have to use this. So every time I tell them why they're doing what they're doing, I feel like they are more engaged or ask more questions to me as well, so.
Right, and I think with the essential skills, it's especially important that we tell them why. Why are you learning this? Why do we care if you know how to communicate effectively? Your employers will want you to know how to communicate effectively. They really, really will, I promise. They think you have the content knowledge. They don't know if you know how to communicate effectively. So if you can tell them that you do, you're that much more likely to get that internship that you want, that job that you want. You're that much more likely to be taken seriously as a leader in your community. Again, if you're trying to get a traffic light put in somewhere and you speak at town hall, you want to be able to communicate effectively. Okay. So going back to the worksheet, just really quickly, I'm asking you all to take a look at your assignment and identify the SAC-COC competency or the course level or gen ed student learning outcome that your assignment's assessing. I figure some of you may be using existing assessment assignments, which is great. Then you know exactly. And some of you may be using something that you haven't used for assessment before, but it's something that you do in the class that you thought, this is something where I ask people to use information for decision making. Does everybody know this kind of off the top of their head? Okay. All right. So I wanted to also look at the language. So we know use information for decision making. I have said that so many times that you're going to wake up saying it in your sleep, but graduates will identify, evaluate, responsibly use information needed for decision making. This is like the longer version that they give us. And then they have these indicators. Develops questions with the appropriate scope for the field. Identifies connections between relevant sources to make a decision. So these are some of the ways that they think students might show mastery at the milestone level, at the general education level for us. So now is a great time to take a look at the connections between the language for the competency and or the student learning outcome that you're using. Are there points of connection? Are there compatibilities with the competency that you're using or the SLO and skill 10? And all of this is in your worksheet too. If you're not sure what your competency is, there is a link that'll tell you what your competencies are depending on your area. Also, are students already being asked to do something that is essentially use information for decision making or that aligns with one of these indicators? Does the assessment already do this in some way? And if not, is there language in the assignment that's similar to skill 10? I'm going to give you all a minute or two to discuss that at your tables.
Audience awareness.
Thanks for being here and yeah, there's
So.
yes. You're ready to start. This is the pre-till. Okay, I have a question.
This is what it is doing so you can see where it but it's still,
Where's that cost? Oh, my God. I'm kind of. And frankly, this, yeah.
Okay, folks,
Yeah.
how many of you found really easy points of connection? Did anybody like have a fairly easy time? Oh, that's okay. How many of you got there eventually? Do we have some folks who like had to think about it a little bit, but their assessment kind of connects? Kind of, okay. How many of you got to the point where you're like, well, I don't know if this is really skill 10, but if I change the assignment so that it's like this, then it's skill 10. Okay. So, but are you having to redo the whole assignment or is it just like a tweak? Does anybody want to give an example of how they can tweak their assignment? To get it to.
Oh, sorry, what?
You got it, right?
Oh,
An example of how you can tweak your assignments.
Skeleton. All right. So I'm just gonna read the indicators that we have here so that sort of have an assignment. I'm gonna start with a very basic class, so probably in some other classes it's gonna change. So starting with, let's say, Spanish 101, where students are barely learning to speak and do things. But one basic assignment could be, for example, write a blog post where you provide information for students that want to come to study to EKU. So one of the indicators says develop questions with the appropriate scope for the field. They have to ask themselves what kind of information students coming to the school would want to know about. So like they have to provide an outline, set of questions that are appropriate for that very simple context. Implement search strategies to find information using credible resources. Where do I find that information? Does the EKU website has that information? Is there information that's out of date or things like that? You know, like they have to work on that in preparing the writing assignment, and then analyze the strength or weaknesses, which is connected to the other one. and then identify the connection between the relevant sources in that decision-making process. So basically, after they go through that process, students are going to use the content for 101, which was basic vocabulary about campus, like they're learning about subjects, about the terms we use for buildings, and use all that to produce a very simple text where they provide information for students that it's relevant and that one come here using their own experience plus the information that they have. They did that little research.
I love that. I like that a lot because it's a light lift. It's a small, low stakes assignment. It's not like this is your end of semester gigantic research paper. It's a small stakes, it's a low stakes assignment. And you're involving a lot of different indicators. Do we need to do all of the indicators in a single assignment? I don't know that we do, but like you're doing it. Absolutely. And I also think I really like that because it's a 101 class and it builds on what they're already learning in GSD 101. So it's, again, orienting them with the campus, using information for decision making, but it is something that's very relevant. It's low stakes, it's easy. I like that. I want to hear more examples, but I also want to be conscious of the time. So we're already kind of getting into this. I'm going to give you, let's take 5 minutes to just start revising your prompt. How can you tweak? How can you add? If you can, I don't know that we got any hands up for this, but if you're already asking them to use information for decision making, can you just make it present, visible in the assignment? If you need to like add a little piece, how could you do that? Just starting to brainstorm. And you're welcome to use the Skill 10 language and talk this through with your table. They know what your assessment is at this point. So ask for help if you need it. And we'll also walk around if you need.
This is the, and maybe it's still sitting things. Actually, if you're defining that program, on a point, you're saying. Yeah.
All we're trying to do is.
This is more. You're taking. You interpret. Reinterpreting that.
Justify
It's there.
As in your past, you take all kind of things, and then take them out and see the water. But giving a Here's your model. This values. To values. Specifically. Oh, and also this process. We should also add the storage.
You really haven't. To do with feeling that.
Yeah.
There's no frame of mind.
So maybe something. It's always my question, a decision. Yeah. Taking my knowledge, funding up, but. You then. It's essentially. Zero answer until fixed. And then. And we. It's the question, you know. We don't have any. Building that. My guess. I don't know. This is black green. Back blood. They might have to. What are the strengths of this?
Okay, folks, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to hear from people. Who felt like this is going to be easy to do? I know at least I know of at least one person who's going to be able to build this in very easily to their assessments. Can I pick on you, Dom?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Just brief example.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think Kelly and I were here sitting and I was walking her through the assessments that we use specifically for English 102, which is a research writing class. So it fits in naturally, I think, really great with using information, but also on the fact that because I just had to do a STAR report, right, for the program, and with that I had to do the learning improvements, which were essentially already trying to do this tilt approach and making more clear and transparent what we wanted students to be explaining about how they were using information, how they were using stylistic considerations, right, their SAC-COC competencies. And these both map really, so I have two new learning improvements already that I added as part of the earlier assessment, which I think are actually going to map really well with what we need to do with these. So with minimal changes and like no changes to the assignments, really just calling out the language explicitly, I think that I can get there with this.
Would you be willing to share with us like a before and after at some point?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Those of you who are having a tougher time, what are the barriers that you're encountering? What are the things that you're running into? I know I talked to one table where it's modalities. This needs to be assessed in an online class and it needs to be assessed in an in-person class. So how do we assess that across modalities? So that's something that we will keep in mind and give you support for in the TILT workshop and other upcoming workshops. But there are ways to do that. It doesn't need to be identical. Something could be a discussion board post in an online class and an in-class activity for in-person. Other barriers that you're running into, other things that where you're struggling, places pain points.
I could share a pain point, not from the skill that I need to be working on, but just thinking about some of my colleagues with other gen ed courses. And I know with this coming back to the concerns about, well, again, these questions that we've been wrestling with, I think, at the early part of this session, what exactly does this skill look like when it's a more humanities focused course or something we don't necessarily maybe traditionally think about as using information, right? So this question, well, what does information look like, or what does the use of information look like, or decision making even, what does that look like in something that is maybe more humanities focused or more arts focused? And just to rethink that, because I think there can be a tendency to sometimes think of these terms as maybe more instrumental or as more clinical or research driven, right? So if you're in a setting or in a course that doesn't involve that, what does that look like? So I think developing, again, that flexibility around flexibility yet consistency around the terminology. Right, I think is just going to continue being important for a lot of classes to be able to fit smoothly with this with skill 10.
Okay. Some of you may not want to talk about the pain points, but do be thinking about them. I would love for you to upload the worksheets if you have the time to like fill out, especially that very first one about language and the very last one that can inform what we're thinking about in terms of where do you need support. One thing I do want to close by saying is like, think of these broadly rather than narrowly. Not all Skill 10 assignments need to be a traditional research paper. Trina is amazing at finding places that you can use Skill 10. In that worksheet, there are some slides linked where she has examples of Skill 10 assignments that are things like write a letter to a legislator. Do a little bit of research on a topic or a piece of legislation that you care about and write a letter to a legislator. That is using information for decision making. There are all kinds of ways that you can conceive of this. I really liked Alfonso's example of the student blog post about like, here's, get interested in this. Like, here's some things that you might want to know about this. That's a really low stakes. It's not a big, gigantic research paper, but it's still using the skill. So do you think broad rather than narrow? And let us know where you're getting stuck. Like, use that last question. If there are places where you're like, this is a real barrier for me, please write it in there. Upload it into the folder that's linked at the top of that document. We are at 4:01. I will be here if you have questions. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for participating in this. And do consider registering for the tilt session, because you've started thinking deeply about this assignment. You started thinking about how can I incorporate Skill 10. This is the place where you're actually going to dig into that and actually think about the purpose. How do you talk about the purpose? How do you link in Skill 10? How do you talk about your criteria? All of that. And also maybe consider thinking through your second competency and your element specific skill in the same way. Some of you are probably doing that at the same time.
Who is going to? How do I ask this question? Who's judging whether what I do or what my department does, my program does for this? Who's going to make the decision about whether our assignment passes muster or not?
So UPAC will be the ones who will ultimately, the University Planning and Assessment Committee we're the ones who, we all fill out the STAR reports. We get to spend extra time looking at STAR reports because we love them so much. So we look at the STAR reports and we're like, is this meeting the criteria that it needs to?
If you want somebody to look at them
yeah.
before, like this summer or this later in
Yeah.
May this summer, we are gonna host some workshops where people can come in. We'll have different skill leads here where you can like come in and have somebody sit down and see if it meets all of the pieces.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The skill workshops in April will be great for this.
And just a real quick plug
Yeah.
that might help. And I went to all those skill workshops last time, and I'm on UPAC, but I still reached out to the provost office when I first wrote my things, and I was like, give me some feedback. And they were like, oh, well, you might try this instead and make that a little bit smaller. Like they gave me some really helpful comments that made it better. So I'll just say that.
I don't anticipate there being major problems where like the skills are just completely misaligned. I think the biggest thing is to make sure that it's explicit in the assignment, that you're actually saying this assignment is assessing use information for decision making. That's really the biggest thing. I think that's the biggest place where even people redesigning their assignments.
Designs this past summer, and the redesigns were for embedding the essential skills. And they did that. And the essential skill was everywhere in the assignment. But we had several that at no point did they say, this is the essential skill. And so that's the reason we keep pushing that as much as possible, because again, they redid their assignment, it was fantastic. But in that purpose piece, and you'll see some of those examples, especially the one that they brought up from Rickett, it is great because it has the SLO at the beginning, and then it says the purpose of this assignment is to teach you how to collaborate and work in teams through. And then she also reinforced it a few other times throughout the assignment, but at the end of that assignment, students definitely knew that they collaborated and worked in teams, and they should be able to articulate that. So.
And just to add to what Star was saying, I think this is one of the things that makes talking about the skills different from working with the SAC COC competencies, because with the competencies, right, those are things that students aren't necessarily seeing those spelled out. Of course, they're based on the SLOs that are in our classes, but our SLOs look different than a competence. So
Yes.
usually on our assignments, we've been calling out, here are the SLOs that we're meeting. We have to do a similar thing with the essential skills, right? Is to explicitly call them out as opposed to hiding them and only the assessors seeing them. So it's both for assessment and, more importantly, for the students to be developing awareness off of it. So I think that would be, to me, I think that's the biggest difference.
I will also say, I think if you're taking an assignment through this PD series, I would be shocked if it wasn't aligned. And the goal is, right, we know that there's probably more courses than you can go through the series with in a lot of departments and programs. But these are the exemplar assignments. You've taken it through all of these workshops. You've started to think about how to align the skill. You've tilted the assignment. You've done a specific workshop on skill 10 and one on your element specific skill. Now that can be something that you show to other folks in your program who weren't able to make the workshops, who need to do the same process. Congratulations, you're now the expert in your department. Sorry. / you're welcome. We are also here to support you through that process. We will do program sessions by request. We will have, as Star said, we'll probably have some like office hours sessions. So there's a lot of support available. Star has built an awesome and extensive broad profile team for a reason, because we know this is a lot and we know you all need a lot of support.
Sure.
Yes. Yes.
So if you all will do the skill 10 workshop dates poll, we are trying to set up the skill workshops that are going to be specifically for skill 10. It was sent out with other communication, but I think it got buried. But we want to do these based on element, and we're going to try to do it as best we can. We are planning on 4 different workshops. If we schedule one that's your element and you cannot make it at that time, you are welcome to attend one of the others. But we're trying to get them as close to the elements as possible. But we need everybody to fill out this. We're trying to get it by Friday so we can get those dates on your calendar as early as next week. So if you'll just scan that first QR code to figure out for us to help develop those skill workshops for skill 10. We have the dates, I think, April the 23rd, 24th, and 27th, 28th, or 28th, 29th.
And we'll send out a reminder email about the worksheets, and we'll include the link to the workshop poll as well.
Relating to the SAC COC competencies, is there a requirement that those be assessed in a manner in which the student is not aware that that assessment is occurring?
Not at all.
Okay.
No. It is, in fact, tomorrow we're going to talk about rubrics, and we're going to talk about trying to make those competency rubrics a little friendlier for students. The goal here is, again, to have consistent language, especially in the rubrics that we use, so that we can teach to the rubrics and we can use a unified rubric for each element. And the students understand what we're assessing. I think having a rubric that's comprehensible by students is very, very compatible with TILT principles also. There is not a requirement for them to not know.
Okay.
And if you prefer for them to know, awesome. That's great. And Gil is going to tell you a lot about how to accomplish that. If you all are, please, if there are still snacks out there, please go enjoy those. If you have questions, you're welcome to stay. If you want to stay here for a little bit and write things, do it.
Still syllabus statement.
Yes.
There's often, Joe will often be linked into that Q&A. But it basically is for Gen Ed where it has syllabus statement, it has the field, and it has the direction that
Thank you. I forgot to mention that, but yes. Again, with transparency, we want a syllabus statement. We want them to hear it 12 times.